Dr. V. Ravi Shankar, who is with the Department of Physics at IIT Kanpur since 1989 and is presently serving as the head of the department. He obtained his doctoral degree from University of Mysore in 1987 and subsequently carried out a postdoctoral work as a visiting fellow at TIFR, Bombay. He is a theoretical physicist whose chief interests are quantum chromodynamics with emphasis on quark, gluon plasma, quantum information theory, quantum Hall effect. Apart from core courses, he has taught several elective in the high-tech research areas such as special and general relativity, particle physics, quantum chromodynamics, and quantum computation. Now I request Dr. Ravi Shankar to start his talk.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a great pleasure for me to be here. So this piece of work that I am going to report today is a work which is done with an undergraduate student. In fact, he has done almost all the hard. So what we are going to do is not look at anything very complicated or deep. These are some simple exercises that we have done. And since it is supposed to be a school, I have kept it to the basic minimum, except that I don't see the students. Okay. So the idea is to look at something which is very, very well known. Concept of separability in two cubic systems. Okay. So this goes back something which is been very well studied and which is very well known, because the concept of separability was first introduced by Werner, and then subsequently Asher-Perez was able to show the partial positive transpose criterion. So the question is, maybe should we go back and look at it again? The answer is that while all the approaches have been kind of existential, they give you a criterion whether a state is separable or not. One normally does not ask for the kinds of separable expansions that one can have. And the other reason that we want to look at it is to use this as a tool to ask a question as to what would be the way of optimally preparing a state. I will define that concept somewhat more precisely as we go along, and that is what we want to do. Okay. So in order to keep simple things simple, let us start with the most basic of the notions. So let us remind ourselves what a separable state is. So remember, if you have a bipartite system consisting of, let us say, two qubits, that is what we are going to be interested, labeled A and B. So if there is a bipartite system labeled by two subsystems A and B, we say that the state is separable if it can be written as a sum of separable states. That is, each of them should be a direct product of a density operator in the Hilbert space corresponding to the subsystem A, and the Hilbert space corresponding to the subsystem B, and then you add them up. The motivation for this is to imagine that any classical distribution function can be built in this particular way. You have a whole bag of states corresponding to a system A. You have a whole bag of states corresponding to system B. You pick them up, put them together, form a composite state, a bipartite state, attach a weight mu1. Or if you were to look at it as a procedure, if there are a large number of them, take n1 of them, which are in this particular state, take n2 of them, which are in row 2a cross row 2b, and build them. So once we do that, if it is separable, we say that any correlation that we see is intrinsically classical. Because you see, because each of these terms on the right-hand side, they do not contain any intrinsic correlation. And one of the important results in classical statistical mechanics is that all classical correlations can be understood in terms of this language. So that is the thing. So for the sake of completeness, we have these weights mu1, mu2, mu3, etc. Obviously, they will be greater than or equal to 0, and their sum will be equal to 1. The fundamental insight when we look at quantum states vis-a-vis classical states is that there are quantum mechanical states which cannot be written in this particular form. Okay? Whereas every classical state can be written in this particular form. And these are the states which we call as entangled. Strictly speaking, the concept of entanglement is unambiguously understood only when the state is pure. When we go to mixed state, which we are looking at, there are many, many criteria for entanglement. For example, separability is one criterion, concurrence is another criterion, and they do not necessarily agree with each other. But for our purposes here today, we are going to look at separability, because states which are not separable, they exhibit non-locality, they violate Bell inequality. So they have a kind of close relation with what the experiments are, at least when it comes to UPR correlations. So let us concentrate on this. So just to give an idea of what kind of states we are interested in, we have the most entangled states. An example is the singlet state 0, 1, minus 1, 0, okay, which does not admit any expansion of this particular kind. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you have the separable states. So I have written the state xy. My x belongs to the Hilbert space corresponding to the qubit A, y belongs to the Hilbert space corresponding to the qubit B, and I have taken a direct product. These separable states are, of course, prolific in the sense that they can be pure, they can be mixed. So you can start with a pure state which has a 0 entropy and go all the way up to identity. So they are quite large in number. Okay. Now the question is, I have given you a definition of separability, what we know of separability. That is the question that we are asking. Okay. Now, when it comes to the separability of any arbitrarily bipartite state, it's a very complicated thing. I mean, it is not a question that can be easily settled, and it takes us to the problem of completely positive maps, which we don't want to get into, at least not today. So our aim is actually something which is much more modest, and it is simpler, okay? So I'm going to state the aim in a while, but first of all, let us look at what the criterion for separability is. So the one famous criterion is, of course, the partial transpose, which I have defined here. So write down the density operator in a separable basis. x1, x2 refers to the basis for the qubit A, y1, y2 refers to the indices corresponding to qubit B, and you perform a transpose only on one of the qubits. In this case, for example, I have done a transpose on the second qubit. Now, the very interesting observation that Perez made was that if a state is separable, then if I do a partial transpose of this particular kind, then the partially transposed state is also a valid state. That is to say, it satisfies all the properties of a density operator. It represents the valid state of a physical system. So that follows simply from this expansion which I had defined earlier. So one thing that we immediately see from this equation is that positive partial transpose is a necessary condition for separability. Of course, to prove sufficiency is a much harder problem, and that was shown again for two qubit systems by Perez himself, or Horodeczki, I don't remember. And later it has been extended to a qubit and a qubit system. That is a spin half and a spin one. You have a two-dimensional Hilbert space and a three-dimensional Hilbert space. Okay? So this was, okay, that has been shown by Horodeczki. Okay. So we need a measure to quantify whatever we have said. And the measure is a very simple thing to do. And here is the prescription. You perform a partial transpose. You determine the eigenvalues. If an eigenvalue is negative, then take its magnitude and multiply it by 2, and that gives a measure of entanglement. This, of course, will work only if I have a 2-qubit system or a qubit or a spin-1 system. As I told you, if I go to higher spin systems, then the condition is necessary but not sufficient, so it is not going to give much. Otherwise, n is equal to 0. So all this multiplication by 2, etc. is done in order to fix the range between 0 and 1. Separable states have 0 negativity, and the Bell states have maximum negativity, which is equal to 1. Okay. So all this is textbook stuff, which we teach in the first few lectures of quantum information theory. And then, as I told you, people go on to do more complicated things, completely positive maps, etc., which I am not going to do. Therefore, the good question to ask is, why flog a dead horse? It seems everything is settled, at least as far as the 2-qubit systems are concerned. The answer is, actually, there are some interesting questions which one can ask. These interesting questions have a straightforward answer when it comes to pure states, but they need not possess a straightforward answer when it comes to mixed states. For example, I could ask, find the set of all transformations that connect states with a given negativity. This is a very large set of transformations, and they are not restricted to be unitary. There is a separable pure state, and identity is a separable mixed state, and obviously there is no unitary transformation that connects them. Therefore, if I look at the space of all possible states, including the pure and the mixed states, one would be interested in knowing the set of all transformations that connect the states with a given negativity. Yet another question that we could ask is, given a separable state, how many kinds of separability expansions are possible? Now, that is a question which is not answered by negativity. It only tells us that it is separable, but it does not tell you how many expansions are there, and one might be interested in knowing that. So let us digress and remember what happens in concurrence. In concurrence also you make all possible expansions of the states, and at the end of the day you show that if a state has a given concurrence, there are actually exactly 4 states of the same pure state concurrence from which you can construct the state. Now, why should I be interested in inequivalent separability expansions? I would be interested in that because I would like to evolve some optimal criteria for preparing a state with a given negativity. And I'm going to spend quite some time on that. The first thing that we learn in density operators is that once you have prepared a state, you do not know how it was prepared, unless it is a pure state. If it is a pure state, of course, it is prepared. But if it is a mixed state, we do not know how it is prepared. The best example is an unpolarized system. It could have been prepared by putting equal admixtures of states in any orthonormal basis. There is no way of preparing. However, from a practical viewpoint, one may try to say that given this particular mixed state, is there the simplest way of preparation? That is a good question to ask. So what I am going to discuss today is to address the latter 2 questions. What are the inequivalent separability expansions? And use that to evolve optimal criteria for preparing a given state. Okay. I will be making a few statements on the set of transformations that connect with a given negativity, but not all. But that comes as we get along, but it is not really our purpose. And as I told you, our results are all completely restricted to 2 qubit states. Okay. So the strategy is, I'm not interested in giving proofs in this particular talk. I will look at a few special cases and sort of indicate how to go to a generalization. And it will be illustrative. The proof will be outlined. We will take some special cases and I will give you some hints. Those of you who are interested, of course, we can always discuss later. Of course, when I look at a special case, I should look at a case which is simple but non-trivial. So what I will do is, I will consider tensor polarized states, which I will define in a short while. So the interest in tensor polarized states is that they are correlated states because they are bilinears in the spins or the individual qubit degrees of freedom. So they are invariably correlated. And always the big question in quantum computation or quantum information is, how do I distinguish a quantum correlation from a classical correlation? What are genuine quantum correlations? That is always an interesting question. So this is a non-trivial example. And of course, these tensor polarized states have few states as subsets. Therefore, in some sense, the Bell states also come as a limiting case. Okay. So now let me start with a recall of what my tensor polarized states are. So everyone knows that the most generalized state has this particular form. Most general state, a 2 qubit state. We have the identity. This is entirely sitting in the Hilbert space of the qubit 1, A dot sigma cross 1. My sigma are the Pauli operators. Then this is the polarization in the language of a physicist of the qubit B, and this is my correlation sigma I cross sigma j. So there are 3 in number, 3 plus 3 plus 6 plus 9, 15. So I have a normalized density operator and this is my state. Okay. So if I were to give a general demonstration of the separability, then I would have looked at this, but it would only complicate matters as far as discussions are concerned. So let us not bother about that. So to start with, what I will do is I will put the vector polarizations. So my notation is A is the vector polarization for the qubit A, B is the vector polarization for the qubit B, Pij is the tensor polarization, which is the correlation between A and B. And the question, of course, is how much of it is quantum and how much of it is classical. Okay. So what we want to do is to remove this individual qubit polarizations. That is to say, we maximize the correlation and we look at the tensor polarized state, which is identity cross identity plus Pij sigma equals sigma j. Now, when I'm looking at the concept of separability, One thing that we should remember is that you take a state and perform local transformations, SU2 cross SU2, it is not going to change the entanglement content. In the case of pure states, the most general transformation that you can do is actually this local transformation. But as I told you, when it comes to the mixed state, there are more general transformations. It's a much bigger class. No, we do not want to be bogged down by these local transformations. It is good to gauge them away, so to say. So what we will do is to choose a canonical basis for this state. That is to say, I will choose a convenient basis. I will, by performing an SU2 cross SU2, and bring the state into a canonical form. For the sake of counting, for example, there are 9 parameters here. My SU2 cross SU2 has 6 parameters. So the naive counting tells me that if I go to the canonical basis, there must be 3 parameters, which is what you see here. Essentially, the claim is that this state, under the local transformation, can be brought to the form identity sigma x cross sigma x, sigma y cross sigma y, sigma z cross sigma z, alpha, beta, and gamma are there. So there are essentially 3 parameters. So once we freeze this, then we get rid of this SU2 cross SU2, and we can look at genuine separability expansions. So this is exactly like the gauge degree of freedom which we employ, for example, in gauge theories, electrodynamics or Yang-Mills theories or whatever. Okay. Now, as I told you, our approach is illustrative through very, very simple examples. So I will start with the simplest example. Even among those parameters, I will put 2 of them equal to 0, and I will put only 1 parameter. Therefore, my state is alpha is sigma x cross sigma x. Now it is child's play to verify that it can be written as a sum of 2, what I shall call is a strongly separable state. So it's a very simple expansion, and I have shown it here. So rho A is simply given by half of 1 plus root alpha sigma x. This is half of 1 plus root alpha sigma x. This sigma x is, of course, for the qubit A. The other sigma x is for the qubit B. That is what we have. And I can construct. So it might appear that there is no great insight in doing this. Of course, this expansion is actually not unique because there are many, many ways of distributing alpha. I could have put an alpha by beta, and I could have written a beta here. Okay? So the wisdom is that even in this very simple case, there are many, many separable expansions because I can redistribute this weight alpha among these 2 states in many, many ways. And every time I redistribute, the property of the subsystems is changing. For example, the entropy is changing. That is something that we can keep in mind. So what I can do for alpha and beta equal to 0, gamma equal to 0 can be repeated for the other 2 cases. I have only correlation in the y degree of freedom. I have my correlation only in the gamma degree of freedom. I can repeat that exercise. Okay. So what did I achieve? I constructed 3 distinct states, distinct classes of states, separable states, and I constructed a trivial separable expansion, separability expansion. But actually I have achieved something more if I remember that there is something called the convexity of separable states. Take separable states and add them up, you get a separable state, provided you put physical weights. That is the meaning of convexity, which we write more precisely here. Rho lambda 1 plus 1 minus lambda rho 2 is separable if 0 is less than or equal to lambda less than or equal to 1. So what we can therefore do is, given these states, I can construct the states in the convex hull of these 6 points. So now I have covered a fairly large region in this 3-dimensional space of all the separable states. Okay. So here is a simple example. Suppose I look at the 2-dimensional plane from alpha and beta. So this is my rhombus, okay? And then all the states within this are separable, and if you give me any state within it, by convex superposition, I can reconstruct them. Okay? It is as simple as that. There is no great mathematical thing involved in it. If I were to look at the most general tensor polarized states, I have this octahedron, and then you have the convex hull of 6 points. And it might interest you people to know that if I look at the faces, the states on the surface, they are all corresponding to states where the individual qubit states are all zero entropy states. They are all constructed out of the pure states. Okay. Now, at this point, a good question to ask is, what have I covered? Have I covered all possible separable states in this expansion? Or is it that there are still some of them left out? So let us remember that the partial transpose criterion actually allows me to identify all possible states, and the answer to that is given in the next figure. Okay. So if I look at all possible tensor polarized states, that is this large region which is shown in the yellow, which contains this violet one or within the inside, the purple one which is inside. And the construction is giving me the space of separable states. So the yellow states, the states which are labeled as yellow, they are the entangled states. And the Bell states are sitting at the vertices. Okay, I think there is only one Bell state here in this. Okay, the one Bell state is sitting at a vertex here. Okay, because we have frozen the local transformation degree of freedom. It's a very simple exercise to check that if I were to compare the region from the PPT criterion, I have actually filled up the whole state, whole space. I have not left out any space at all. Therefore, I have in fact constructed a separable expansion for every single separable state within this particular region. So we start with very, very simple considerations, and we are actually able to make a separability expansion. And this gives us the hope that probably one can take this problem a little bit further and try to analyze it in a more systematic fashion. So this was a warm-up, if you feel like. Okay. So what I will now do is to look at what Bharat would like to call separability construction. But what I mean is, I would like to look at all possible inequivalent ways of expanding a state if there is a separable state. Then we will move over to non-separable states and ask other questions. And we have to look at the construction procedure. Okay. So in going to this, we have to ask a few questions to ourselves. This procedure of having a separable expansion worked for the purely tensor polarized state. Maybe the purely tensor polarized states are so special, it works, and it does not work for the other states. That is one possibility. Therefore, we have to ask ourselves, can we evolve a general procedure? Now, if I can evolve a general procedure for the 2-qubit systems, maybe I can use it for higher spin systems. So suppose I have a spin 1 and a spin 3/2, or a spin 2 and a spin 2 system. We know that positive partial transpose criterion does not work, and people have in fact found states which obey positive partial transpose, but they are entangled states. So they have found states for which necessity is there, but sufficiency is not there, but maybe we can use this. And maybe I can use this to narrow down the region of entangled states consistent with PPT criterion. As I keep on having more and more constructive expansions, I can narrow down the states, and I can search for those exceptional states. So we have to find out whether this is some kind of the tensor polarized states were so special that the result was an artifact of that, or there is something genuine. Okay. The claim, of course, is that it is not an artifact. What we have got is an illustration of a general procedure. So in order to illustrate that, I need a few notions, which I will explain in this slide. So the first important notion that I need is the concept of uniform separability, which I will define here. Remember, I defined a separable state to be, which can be expanded as sums of direct products of the states. So rho 1a cross rho 1b is a direct product, rho 2a cross rho 2b is a direct product. So you have put them together and they have associated weightages mu1, mu2, mu3, etc. What do I mean by uniformly separable? By that I mean these weights are all the same. I will put mu1 equal to mu2 equal to mu1 equal to 1 over n, where n is the number of terms in the expansion. So we are going to go through a procedure in the following fashion. This requires mu1, mu2 to be, so we want this to be rational. But then if they are real, I will approximate to any degree of approximation by the rationals. And once I have the rationals, I don't claim any distinctness of rho 2a with rho 1a, etc. And this uniform separability is achieved. This is a tool, and of course it causes redundancy. Like if I have a Bell state, I can write it as a sum of 1 over n times the Bell states. It is a tool for our understanding. Redundancy is not of any concern, but we will use it later. So this is purely for the simplicity of analysis. Okay. So that is the important point, right? Now, once I have this, I am rewriting my condition so that I don't have to go back to the state. This is my most general state, except that I have, I don't know, we have used a different notation here. U is the vector polarization for the first qubit, V is the vector polarization for the second qubit, this is the tensor. Now, my separable expansion, this is my density operator for the system A, my density operator for the system B. I am making an explicit expansion in terms of the corresponding Pauli operators. So I have my P's, which are the vector polarizations of the qubit A, Q's, which are the vector polarizations of the qubit B. So what is our task? The task is you are given U, you are given V, and you are given the tensor polarization X. Given that, we are supposed to find P nu and Q nu, as many of them as they are required. I have assumed that it is uniformly separable. I have demonstrated that it can be made as close to uniform separability as possible. Therefore, I have put the weightage n. So the trick is you arrange these individual single qubit polarizations as column vectors of 3 by n real matrices. So that is the first step. So what I want to emphasize is that what we have done is algebraically extraordinarily simple, 12th standard algebra, okay, school algebra, but I think it does throw some light. So each column actually represents the individual qubit polarization. So if there are n expansions, so the first expansion has P1, the second has P2, the third has 3, etc., the third state, and the same thing is repeated for the qubit, second qubit. So that is what we have. Okay. Now I can find out what are the conditions to be satisfied by P and Q. I go back, I make a comparison with my original state, so I get the following relations, and this is actually the key set of relations in the whole of the analysis. Okay. My matrix P multiplied by the transpose of Q should give me the tensor polarization. P operating on AN should give me n into U. If I had not assumed uniform separability, then the appropriate weightage would have come. My Q operating on n should give me n into V, where my AN is the special vector which has entry 1 all throughout. So if I look upon it as a purely algebraic problem, we are saying invert these relations given AN, given U, given V to find out appropriate matrices P and Q. It is as simple as that. Okay, that is the question that we are asking. And the matrices P and Q, of course, contain the complete information on the individual qubit polarization. Okay. Again, I am not going to give the most general proof. It is much better to illustrate it in a special case because the general proof can be read. Okay, can be written down and it can be read. So what I will again do is to not consider the most general state, but a very, very special state. So what I will do is, I will look at a state which is not completely tensor polarized. I will look at a state where my qubit 1 has a vector polarization, which is given by U here along the z direction, which can be chosen by a suitable local transformation. And then there are these tensor correlations in the xy plane. I have removed the tensor correlation in the z plane, in which case my condition on P and Q reduced to this relation. My matrix P multiplied by the transpose of Q should satisfy this equation. The right hand side is given and the left hand side is to be found out. My P operating on AN gives me the vector polarization multiplied by n. Since there is no polarization corresponding to qubit B, Q annihilates AN. So these are the things. So now what we have to do is to make some simple use of rank and nullity requirements. It immediately tells me that the number of terms in the expansion, the minimum number is actually equal to 3 in this. That is very clear from this particular matrix. In the more general case, actually it turns out that it should be n equal to 4. We need at least 4 terms, and that is the wisdom in separability. So what we will do is, since we are not interested in completely optimal expansion at this particular point, I will choose n equal to 4, and I will illustrate what happens. Okay. To proceed further, we need 2 more concepts. I have already introduced the notion of uniform separability. One is what we call the left elementary transformation, and the other is what we call the right orthogonal transformations. Okay, so the whole talk is actually an exercise in the first few chapters of any algebra book. Okay. So let us take E and F to be any non-singular 3 by 3 matrices, and suppose we perform a transformation, P prime equal to UP, Q prime equal to FQ. They are multiplying by the left. Is that okay? Then the condition on P and Q change because I am multiplying, n comes out, E into F of t. P prime AN will be given by n into this, Q prime equal to 0. Okay, so what I am trying to do is to look at the uniqueness of P and Q. In order to settle that, I will first look at left elementary transformations. Okay. So if you stare at them, actually you will find that these left elementary transformations have a dual role to play. Suppose I had managed to solve for some particular state and I found the matrices P and Q, which gives me a separable expansion. The minute I perform a transformation, I get a new P prime and a Q prime. And suppose they are not the same, and suppose E does not leave you invariant, what it does is to allow me to construct a family of separable states given one separable state. That is to say, if I know the expansion of a separable state, I can generate a whole family of states for which the expansion is known. This, of course, does not exhaust all possible separable states, so it's only a subset. The other possibility is that this operation A and F leaves the product PQT invariant, it stabilizes PQT, and suppose E also stabilizes U, then it can generate inequivalent separability expansions for a given state. So I make one separable expansion, I will find another equivalent things. Of course, we are not going to claim that this gives me all kinds of expansions on the right-hand side. This is not exhaustive. One point that we have to remember when we are performing this transformation is that if you choose these left elementary operations to be orthogonal, they will reduce to local transformations. We should avoid that they are trivial gauge transformations. And please remember, E and F are much more general than orthogonal transformations because we are admitting arbitrary non-singular matrices. So obviously the only invariant is the rank of X. So these are indeed very large group of transformations. Okay. So here is a very simple example. Look at this. This is a left elementary transformation. Gamma and gamma prime are not equal to 0. And F is given by this. This transformation leaves this state invariant. So this is an example where the state is left invariant. So the state is not left invariant, but PQT is not left invariant. Therefore, it generates inequivalent expansion. Now, after having looked at the elementary transformations, I will introduce another interesting transformation which I call right orthogonal, and these are very good. I will make a transformation, I will multiply P by O, Q also by O. And these O have a further restriction, they should stabilize AN. They should leave AN invariant when they act on it. So that means if I choose AN as one of my basis vectors, then that means these are essentially orthogonal matrices in the n-1 dimensional subspace. That is what we have. Once I do that, we can easily check that they leave PQT invariant, P prime AN equal to PAN, Q prime equal to QAN. In other words, these orthogonal transformations generate a family of inequivalent expansions for a given separable state. So I can keep on performing these orthogonal transformations. I will combine with the degree of freedom associated with my left elementary transformations. So you produce me one expansion on the right-hand side. I will produce an infinite number of them, which is labeled by the number of degrees of freedom in O. The only special case is that they also return the same state when there are some further stabilizations, but they are a set of very small subset. Therefore, I have expansions for a given separable state. So in this algebraic approach, since we have exhausted all possible degrees of freedom which yield me P prime Q prime equal to PQ, which stabilizes AN and which stabilizes under the action of P prime and Q prime, we have in essence generated the most general set of transformations that rather the most all possible expansions of a given separable state. Okay. Now what I will do is to illustrate, I started with this particular state where there is a polarization for the qubit A and there is a tensor polarization. So let me continue to illustrate it for these states. Okay, yeah. So there are some simple observations. This is by construction. I had written the vector A4 which had entry 1 everywhere. So this can be written as a direct product of two vectors which are 1, 1 and 1 minus 1. You take a transpose and you do that. And please believe me, you don't have to do any complicated algebra. The minute you write down an equation, you will get a solution for P and Q. So this can be written as root alpha A cross B, root beta B cross A. These are two-dimensional matrices. Therefore, eventually you will get a 3 by n matrix here. This is a 1 by 2, this is another 1 by 2, this is another 1 by 2, which gives me 3 by n, whatever, as I keep on writing them. And the same thing is for Q. Now, once I have generated a particular solution, please notice alpha and beta can again be redistributed, which is a left elementary transformation, and this actually has an important role. Okay. Now, however, there is a constraint. Once I do that, I will determine my P and Q, but these P and Q's vectors, they should represent a valid state. And what is a valid state? We know that the polarization is always bounded by 1. So the modulus of my polarization for qubit should be less than or equal to 1. For polarization for the qubit should be less than or equal to 1, which is an additional constraint. The minute I have this additional constraint, I use the left elementary transformation which I had earlier, and I will maximize the range. So I have shown as an example, there is no point in trying to working it out here. This choice, root alpha and alpha plus beta, etc., gives me the complete choice, and this allows me to write down an expansion for the most general state. I have generated one particular expansion for the most general state. Is that okay? Therefore, once I have this P and Q, then you can perform subsequent elementary operations, subsequent orthogonal transformations. Therefore, you have all possible separability expansions on the right-hand side. Okay. There are a very large number of invariants from the viewpoint of geometry, because they are operating on O4, they leave this vector invariant, and some of the invariants, like the individual magnitudes of the qubit A polarizations are not conserved, but the sum of the polarizations are conserved. The sum of the angles between them are conserved, etc., etc. We have not enumerated them all of them. But in principle, the whole non-uniqueness can be reduced to very beautiful geometric identities, which actually can be checked. But we have not written them here. Okay. Now, what do I do with this expansion? That is the question that we ask. And the claim is that it can be used to have a prescription for preparing states in an optimal manner. That is the claim. Normally, we say that there is a cost of entanglement of formation. And when I am preparing a separable state, we believe that it requires no cost at all. That is not necessarily true. If I go and ask an experimentalist, please prepare this density operator for me, the experimentalist has a lot of effort to put in, and from an information theoretic viewpoint, the experimentalist might like to know what is the simplest prescription, and that is the question that we are asking. Of course, we don't want to restrict ourselves to separable states. I want to go beyond that, but let us start with the separable states. Okay. Now let me look at this quantity, mu1, rho1. So let me look at the state, and let me look at the Shannon entropy of each of these expansions. So this, yes, refers to the Shannon entropy. So I look at the entropy of this direct product state. I look at the direct product of this state. Let us look at this. Now we have seen that my left-hand side is nothing but my rho AB. Obviously, this quantity is not unique. Depending on how I prepare my state, this right-hand side is going to change, because there is no uniqueness of preparing. But one thing I know is that it is bounded by the entropy of my parent state, whatever is on the left-hand side. Now, the general wisdom is that the simplest state to prepare is that which has maximum entropy. The state which has minimum entropy is a pure state, and pure states are very fragile. It is difficult to maintain them. They start decohering. They start interacting with the environment. And in order to prepare a pure state, let alone maintain in the purity, even preparation is very, very difficult. And to give an example, for example, in the concept of accelerator physics, there is a very famous bound called Zeldovich bound, who showed that you cannot prepare an electron beam with a polarization greater than 94%. Invariably, there is a bound. So we want to maximize entropy. So what I will therefore do is, I will define, again, as I told you, I want to only illustrate. I will look at this class of very, very fascinating states, which are the isotropic states. So I'm having an operator sigma A dot sigma B, and the range of alpha is from -1 to 1/3. Otherwise, it would not represent a valid state. When alpha equal to -1, I have a pure state, which is my Bell state. And when it hits the value -1/3, it becomes a separable state. At 0, it is a completely, this is the identity. And when it hits 1/3, it continues to be separable. There, maybe I should spend a little bit of time. At -1/3, what happens is that the population in the singlet subspace and the triplet subspace is made equal in the language of a physicist. Okay, population. So if I look at the eigenvalues, it will be like half and 1/6, 1/6, and 1/6 in the other triplet state. This, of course, has the same eigenvalues for all of them. And here, the population is entirely distributed in the triplet state. Triplet space. Triplet space is the space of all symmetric states. This is the singlet state, which is the antisymmetric state, which is one-dimensional. And here, the population distribution between the symmetric space and the antisymmetric space is exactly the same. So as we are moving, we see there is some kind of a phase transition that is taking place. The entanglement abruptly falls to 0. That is what we have. So this is a very interesting state. Therefore, I would like to look at them. Okay. So for my isotropic states, my alpha is going all the way from -1 to 1/3. At 1/3, -1 to 1/3, it should be -1/3. -1 to -1/3, it is entangled. So ignore this particular region. We are interested in separable state. Now, what we have done is to look at the supremum, if you feel like, and we make a plot of this supremum. Okay? So this tells me for any given state, the optimal state of preparation is to look at this maximum allowed entropy. The minute I hit 1/3, of course, that entropy will have a state 0. When I come to identity, of course, prepare identity with identity matrices, which has the maximum allowed entropy here. Otherwise, otherwise the maximum entropy for any of these states is given by this SP, and I can assure you that the solution is quite unique in this particular case. So we have got a prescription for preparing them. SP drops to 0 at the boundary of separable and entangled states. There is no question of asking what is the expansion here, because these are partially entangled states, and therefore we have not yet come to that. Okay. Now, after having illustrated that, I want to go and look at a general state. And I would like to introduce what I think is a fairly interesting concept, so please pay a bit of attention. Now I want to look at an arbitrary state. So what do I want to do with an arbitrary state? So this state is not necessarily a separable state. I want to write it as an incoherent superposition of a pure state plus a separable state. If this were not a pure state, but a mixed state, I would make a further decomposition of that mixed state into a pure state plus a separable part. So this separation is canonical, and lambda is the weight associated with the pure state, and 1 minus lambda is the weight associated with the separable part. Now, naturally, when I look at the entanglement of the state rho, the entanglement has to come entirely from the pure component. I am calling the pure component as pi1 because it is the one-dimensional projection, and there is no contribution from the separable part to the entanglement. When I look at the entropy, all the contribution comes from my separable part because my pure state does not have any entropy. In other words, my parent state, the 2-qubit state, has two attributes. It has a certain entanglement, it has a certain entropy. On the right-hand side, the entropy resides entirely within the separable domain. The entanglement lies entirely within the pure state domain. That is what I have. So which is what we are saying. So what I will now do is, since I have associated the weight 1 minus lambda, the supremum of the entropy, we will multiply it by the weight 1 minus lambda, and we will call it as the entropy of preparation. And I would like to maximize this. Okay. Now, we know that this decomposition between the pure entangled part and the mixed separable part is not unique. It is not unique. So for isotropic states, there is only one pure state. That is the Bell state. Now, what I can do is I can choose my lambda anywhere I want for this state, and the contribution coming from the separable state keeps on moving all the way from -1/3 to 1/3. So what we can do is to have an extremization procedure in order to prepare this particular state. And we would like to give an extremization procedure inspired by the concept of free energy. Let me give an analogy. If I take a system at a finite temperature, if I take a system at a 0 temperature, I would say the system would like to sit in the minimum energy state. But if I take a system at a finite temperature, then there are two conflicting, competing things. The energy should be minimized, the entropy should be maximized, and the system makes a compromise, and it minimizes the free energy, E minus Ts. Now, in a similar manner, suppose you give me a state, and I want to make an expansion on the right-hand side. Preparing a state with an entanglement, pure state with an entanglement is tough. Therefore, I would like to minimize the entanglement component of the pure state, and I would like to maximize the entropy component of the separable part. In other words, the entanglement of the parent state acts like a temperature. The entanglement of the pure state acts like the energy, the pure component, and the entropy acts like an entropy. Therefore, what we can do is to define something called free entanglement in the spirit of free energy, and we demand that this free energy should actually be minimized. Just as free entanglement should be minimized, and obviously it depends on the choice of the decomposition. By the way, this is some kind of an information theoretic approach. This is not necessarily what one might need in reality, because in NMR quantum computation, you want just the opposite. You have a pseudo-pure state, and you want to maximize the entanglement of the pure part, because there the signal is sensitive to the so-called deviation density operator. But barring NMR computation, this is what we need in almost all the cases. Okay. So this is an illustration which we want to show for this particular state. Sigma z1 minus 1 minus sigma z, there is a tensor polarization. This is the space of all states, and there is a figure here which we can ignore right now because this is explained completely here. If you look at this particular state, the beauty is that the states on the circumference are all pure states. The diameter, the states along the diameter are all separable. B and B prime are separable states. S and S prime are pure separable states. Now what I do is I pick up any arbitrary state, and I'm going to use convexity again, and I'll ask which is the best way of preparing that. And the answer is clearly from the diagram, because I'm going to look at the linear convex combination. I'm going to look at that state which minimizes the entanglement, that is the pure component part, and which maximizes the entropy, and the answer to this is sitting here. I think, what is that expansion that we have? I think we are going to look at this line, MR into A, because this is the one that maximizes. So this gives us a unique way of actually preparing a state. That is what it is going to give us. Therefore, this gives us a simple prescription for actually giving an optimal preparation of the state. Okay. So we are well in time. What we have done is we have developed a new method for explicit construction of all possible separations. And given all possible separations, we have shown that there is something called a cost of preparation, very much analogous to cost of preparation in concurrence, where we have the concept of the analog of the free energy, namely the free entanglement, which allows us actually to minimize the effort in preparing that particular state. Of course, the outlook is we should be able to extend it to higher spins where the sufficiency condition is still not known. There are a number of results which we have for higher spin systems which actually throws light on classical quantum correspondence. Obviously, I did not have time to look at that. I would be happy to discuss with it. And for those people who want to know the references, they are all very basic. So there is a good book on linear algebra by Hoffman and Kunz or Hurstein. And the separability criterion is by Perez. And of course, the separability and necessity conditions were shown by Hrodeczky family. There is a family of results proved by the family of Hrodeczky. And these are the references. Thank you.
Any questions?
Can you describe all the probability distributions with respect to which you can get a separable expansion with this probability distribution as weights?
Yeah.
You have chosen uniform.
Yeah.
But do you have a description of the probability distributions?
Yeah. The answer is not with absolute accuracy, but arbitrary. That is to say, if I approximate the probability weights by rational numbers, then we can get all possible expansions.
If every probability distribution gets included,
yeah,
then you can also go close to the degenerate distribution.
Yeah.
That means you will get any separable state to be close to the product state.
No, sums of product states. Not just the products.
No, but the if that probability distribution becomes degenerate, then you will get.
No, what happens is, as he was pointing out, I will approximate the real weights by rational numbers. I will look at the LCM and I will repeat the states. Now, when I connect all the states which are repeated, it gives me back a rational number to any desired degree of accuracy. So that n becomes larger and larger. The number of terms in the expansion on the right hand side becomes larger and larger as my requirement of the precision becomes sharper and sharper.